In Kerala, there's an old saying that a venomous snake never attacks someone sleeping peacefully, unless provoked. It's something millions of people in Kerala have believed across generations. But on the night of May 6, 2020, inside an air-conditioned room of a house in Anchal, Kollam, a cobra attacked a woman fast asleep. Nobody knows exactly when that snake made its way into the room. The only person who could explain how a snake ended up in that bedroom was the man who woke up unusually early the next morning and left the room before the woman was found unconscious. That woman was Uthra, 25. That man was her husband, Sooraj S. Kumar, a bank employee who had learned how to handle venomous snakes from videos on the internet. What makes this case one of the most unprecedented in the history of Indian criminology isn't Uthra's death itself. It's what happened 2 months earlier, in this very same room with this very same snake. This wasn't the first time Sooraj had tried. Uthra was born and raised in Anchal, a small town in Kollam district, Kerala. She was a young woman who had faced health issues from childhood, but that never stopped her from building a life with everything she had. Uthra's father, Vijayasenan, and her mother, Manimegalai, had spent their whole lives caring for and protecting their daughter. They weren't wealthy, but they'd prepared for Uthra's wedding with all the love parents can give: over 100 sovereigns of gold, a new car, and 10 lakh rupees in cash. It was everything they could give to make sure their daughter would be happy in her new home. Uthra married Sooraj S. Kumar, and the two had a young son together, just 1 year old. To those around them, this was an ordinary family starting a life together. Uthra loved her son and always tried her best to settle into life at her husband's house, even though her health didn't allow her to do as much as others could. But there was one thing Uthra never knew: that the man she called her husband had been looking at her not with love, but with cold, calculated intent for a long time before any of this ever happened. To understand that, we need to look at the man Uthra's parents had trusted their daughter to. Sooraj S. Kumar, 27, worked at a private bank. To the outside world, he was an ordinary husband, building a family life at his home near Adur, Kollam. But behind that facade, Sooraj was quietly nurturing a plan nobody in Uthra's family could ever have imagined. He knew his wife's entire dowry gold was sitting in a bank locker. He also knew that a few months before his wife died, he'd taken out a life insurance policy on Uthra, one that he would fully benefit from should she die. Sooraj started watching tutorial videos on handling venomous snakes online, learning how to approach, control, and use them. He got in touch with Chavarukavu Suresh Kumar, a local snake catcher, and bought 2 snakes at 10,000 rupees each, a Russell's viper and a cobra. According to Suresh Kumar's later testimony in court, Sooraj told him he didn't want a disabled wife and believed people would simply put Uthra's death down to Sarpa dosha, a snake curse, in Kerala's folk belief, with nobody ever suspecting it was murder. And that plan began to unfold. On March 2, 2020, Uthra was bitten by the viper in her bedroom on the 2nd floor of her in-laws' house near Adur. She was rushed to hospital in critical condition and spent 52 days bedridden. She had to undergo cosmetic surgery to treat the damage caused by the venom. During her recovery, she went to stay with her parents in Anchal. This is the detail renowned snake expert Vava Suresh later pointed out to police: a viper simply cannot climb to a 2nd floor on its own, which meant someone had placed that snake in Uthra's bedroom that night. The very same day Uthra was bitten, Sooraj went to the bank and withdrew all the gold from his wife's locker. When police investigated later, this turned out to be one of the most crucial pieces of evidence pointing to Sooraj's true motive. The first attempt had failed. Uthra survived. But Sooraj didn't give up. While Uthra was recovering at her parents' house, Sooraj was already preparing for a second attempt. While Uthra lay recovering at her parents' house in Anchal, Sooraj started preparing for round 2 far more meticulously this time. This time, he wasn't going to leave anything to chance. He bought the cobra from Chavarukavu Suresh Kumar and starved the snake for 11 days from April 24 to May 6, 2020 to make sure it would be hungry, aggressive and would strike the moment it was released. The snake was kept inside a bottle the entire time. He also prepared sleeping pills to make sure Uthra wouldn't wake up and react when the snake was let loose in the room. And he chose exactly the right moment while Uthra was still in the middle of her recovery, her body weak, still living at her parents' house where nobody would think twice about him showing up as her husband coming to visit his wife. On the night of May 6, 2020, after dinner at Uthra's parents' house in Anchal, Sooraj slipped sleeping pills into his wife's drink. Once Uthra had fallen into a deep sleep in the air-conditioned room, Sooraj released the cobra starved for 11 days into the room and let it approach his sleeping wife. Once it was done, Sooraj left the room. Early in the morning on May 7, Sooraj woke up unusually early and stepped out before the rest of the household stirred. Something Uthra's mother later described to police as completely out of character for him, since he was normally the last person in the house to wake up. When Mani Meghalai went into the room to wake her daughter, she found Uthra unconscious on the bed. A large 80-centimeter cobra was found in the room and was killed on the spot. Uthra was rushed to hospital but didn't make it and died that same day, May 7, 2020. Sooraj stood outside wearing the face of a grieving husband. Right after Uthra's death, Sooraj and his family began building a story that this was a natural death, that the snake had simply wandered into the room by accident. They argued that Uthra had already been weak since the first snake bite and that her body couldn't withstand a second one. Sooraj's father, Surendran Panikar, immediately dug a hole in the rubber plantation near the house to bury 38 sovereigns of gold, part of Uthra's dowry gold, which his family had seized for themselves. Sooraj's family believed that with Sarpadosha being such a widely held belief in Kerala, nobody would question 2 snake bites happening back to back. And if nobody suspected a thing, Sooraj would end up with all the gold and the entire life insurance payout on his wife. But Uthra's father didn't stay silent. A week after Uthra's death, her father, Vijaya Senan, reached out to Kerala police. He didn't believe this was a natural death for 2 reasons he couldn't quite explain away. First, the room had air conditioning. Snakes don't like the cold and rarely make their way into an air-conditioned room on their own. Second, Uthra had told her parents that her husband had a fascination for and a skill in handling venomous snakes. On May 21, 2020, he formally filed a complaint with Kerala police. Renowned snake expert Vava Suresh, after inspecting both houses, confirmed the family's suspicions a viper simply couldn't have climbed to the second floor on its own during the first bite, and a cobra was unlikely to have made its own way into an air-conditioned room during the second. Vava Suresh even noted that the snake might have been deliberately provoked or injured to force it to attack someone sleeping. Kerala police stepped in immediately and decided to run DNA testing on the dead cobra, an unprecedented step in the history of Indian criminal investigation. The test results confirmed cobra venom in Uthra's body. But that scientific evidence only confirmed the cause of death. It wasn't enough to say who had put the snake in the room. Police widened their investigation and began tracing the snake's origin. They found that in Kollam and the surrounding areas, not many people had the ability to buy and handle a live cobra. After questioning several people in the community, one name came up: Chavarukavu Suresh Kumar, the local snake catcher. And when Suresh Kumar was questioned, he confessed to selling 2 venomous snakes to Sooraj S. Kumar, Uthra's husband. That was the link police had been looking for, with Suresh Kumar's statement pointing straight at Sooraj. Kerala police formally arrested Sooraj S. Kumar and Chavarukavu Suresh Kumar. Under the weight of increasingly damning evidence, Sooraj couldn't keep his story together any longer. On July 12, 2020, Sooraj publicly confessed before national media that he had bought the snakes, starved the cobra for 11 days, drugged his wife's drink with sleeping pills, and released the snake into the room while she slept. He also admitted that the first attempt with the viper had also been his own doing. As the investigation widened, police found that Surendran Panikar Sooraj's father had buried 38 sovereigns of gold in the rubber plantation. He was arrested in early June 2020 for concealing evidence. In August 2020, Renuka, Sooraj's mother, and Surya, Sooraj's sister, were also arrested on charges of abetting domestic abuse, destroying evidence, and conspiracy. With the full body of evidence and confessions in hand, police moved the case forward to court. Sooraj S. Kumar's trial at Kollam court drew the attention of the entire country, as this was the first case in Indian judicial history where a living animal had been used as the murder weapon. The prosecution built the case around several categories of evidence. DNA testing on the snake confirmed it was the very same one that had attacked Uthra. Snake expert Vava Suresh's testimony established that the snake couldn't have entered the room on its own in either instance. There was Sooraj's own public confession to the media, and there was evidence that gold had been withdrawn from Uthra's locker on the very same day as the first attempt. The court also noted that Sooraj had taken out a life insurance policy on his wife before carrying out the plan. The clearest evidence that this had been premeditated, not an act of impulse. The case would later be added to criminology syllabuses at universities across India as an example of an entirely new category of crime, one where a living animal was used as a controlled murder weapon. On October 13, 2021, Kollam Court, presided over by Additional Sessions Judge Manoj M., found Sooraj S. Kumar guilty of murder, attempted murder in the first attack, and destruction of evidence. He was sentenced to 17 years in prison, plus 2 consecutive life sentences, along with a fine of 5 lakh rupees. It was one of the harshest sentences ever handed down in Kerala, reflecting both the cold calculation and the severity of the crime Sooraj had committed. When the verdict was announced, Uthra's father, Vijay Senan, stood outside the courtroom and told the press he was satisfied, but that he could never forget that even with justice served, his daughter would never come home again. Uthra died at 25. She left behind a son, just 1 year old, a child she'd given birth to despite her own fragile health, and loved with everything she had. In those short months, she got to be a mother. Mani Meghalai, the mother who found her daughter unconscious on the morning of May 7, will have to carry that image with her forever. And Vijay Senan, the father who had spent his whole life saving gold and money preparing for his daughter's wedding, came to realize that the very things he'd given with all his love were exactly what led Sooraj to decide to take Uthra's life. Uthra's young son is growing up without his mother by his side. And the story of his mother, a woman who was coldly plotted against by the very husband she trusted before she ever had the chance to realize it, will remain a part of his life that nobody can ever change. As of when this video was made, Sooraj S. Kumar is serving his sentence in a Kerala prison. The case has gone down in Indian criminological history as the first case where the murder weapon was a living snake, deliberately controlled and used. In 2025, a Malayalam film inspired by this case titled Raja Kumari was announced, starring renowned actress Manju Warrior. It's proof that Uthra's story still lives on in the memory of the people of Kerala and of the whole of India. Uthra's case raises questions with no easy answers. A woman with a disability, recovering from a first snake bite, lying in her parents' house, trusting that the husband who came to visit her was someone who loved her. She had no idea that, All through that time, that very man was starving a snake, preparing for the night she would never wake up from again. Given the sentence of 17 years plus 2 life terms, do you think justice was truly served, in full, for Uthra? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Uthra's story isn't a story about a snake. It's a story about the coldest calculation a human being can carry out against someone they once vowed to protect and love. The most unsettling part isn't the method of the crime, it's the timeline. Sooraj planned, bought the snakes, learned how to handle them, starved them for days on end, all while continuing to live alongside his wife, holding their child, playing the part of an ordinary husband in front of everyone around them. The second lesson comes from the power of forensic science in today's world. DNA testing on the body of a dead snake, something nobody would ever have imagined could become evidence in a murder case, became the decisive link that unraveled Sooraj's entire plan. In today's world, crime finds it harder and harder to stay hidden, no matter how carefully the weapon is chosen. And the final lesson comes from Uthra's father. Vijaya Senan refused to accept silence even just a week after his daughter's death. He walked into a police station while the grief was still unbearable and said out loud what his heart knew but couldn't yet prove. It was that very courage that set off the entire investigation, leading to the verdict on October 13, 2021. Remember her name, Uthra, Anchal, Kollam, Kerala, 2020, a wife, a mother, a woman justice in the end did not forget. Because of a father who refused to stay silent and a DNA test on the body of a snake.